been here before. This is a series for English learners. I am a teacher of English as a foreign language. I live in the Czech Republic. And this series is for learners who are B2 or C1 level. We are reading classic works of English literature, and we are talking about unusual vocabulary, unusual grammar, cultural references that you might not know. And I will try to help you to understand those things and let you enjoy these books maybe more easily than you could if you were reading independently. So this series is aimed at readers who are at a B2 or C1 language level. I have some other ideas. I've been thinking about making a series for more basic English speakers where we will maybe write a story together. That's something that I want to try. And also, I have been thinking of doing another stream where I just read because I like to read out loud. So I was thinking maybe I will choose a book that I haven't read before and just read it out loud one day. So if you have any ideas on something you might like to hear, you can let me know in the chat. So while I'm reading today, I will read this story paragraph by paragraph. And after each paragraph, after each larger piece of text, then I will stop, I will go back, and I will go through the paragraph so that we all understand what's happening. So we are still in the beginning section of Dracula. We are reading about Jonathan Harker. Jonathan Harker is a young man from England, and he is traveling across Europe to meet a client, to meet a customer. And the customer's name, the client's name is Count Dracula. But of course, Jonathan doesn't know that Count Dracula is anything unusual. We think that he's just a human gentleman. Hello, Vernon Insane. I see you. Welcome. Thank you. And so Jonathan is a very scientific man, and he's a very calm and kind of normal young man. So he looks around and he sees these crazy things happening, but he tries to say nothing strange is happening. It's just superstition. But it's becoming harder for Jonathan to pretend that there are no monsters in Transylvania. So the last time that we were reading, last Sunday evening, Jonathan was in a carriage with a driver, and the driver was taking him very quickly through the mountains, and the carriage was being followed by many wolves. And so now Jonathan is alone in the carriage, and the driver has gone out of the carriage to do something with some strange rocks. There's a strange blue fire and some strange rocks, and Jonathan doesn't know what the drivers are doing, but the wolves are all over the place, and the horses are very upset, and Jonathan is very upset too. So this is the last paragraph we read last time. I'll read it one more time, and then we'll start the new section. At last, there came a time when the driver went further afield than he had yet gone, and during his absence the horses began to tremble worse than ever, and to snort and scream with fright. I could not see any cause for it, for the howling of the wolves had ceased altogether. But just then the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind the jagged crest of a beetling, pine-clad rock, and by its light I saw around us a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long, sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They were 100 times more terrible in the grim silence which held them than even when they howled. For myself, I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. It is only when a man feels himself face to face with such horrors that he can understand their true import. So now we're starting the new paragraph for today. All at once the wolves began to howl, as though the moonlight had had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jumped about and reared, and looking helplessly round with and looked helplessly round with eyes that rolled in a way painful to see. But the living ring of terror encompassed them on every side, and they had perforce to remain within it. I called to the coachman to come, for it seemed to me that our only chance was to try to break out through the ring and to aid his approach. I shouted and beat the side of the caleche, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from the side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there I know not, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command, and looking towards the sound, saw him standing in the roadway. As he swept his long arms, as though brushing aside some impalpable obstacle, the wolves fell back, and back further still. Just then, a heavy cloud passed across the face of the moon, so that we were again in darkness. Okay. All right, so the first thing that happens is that the wolves are howling again. They're making their loud, scary wolf sound, as though the moonlight had had some particular effect on them. So it seems that the moonlight is doing something to the wolves, and the wolves are beginning to howl. And when the wolves howl, it says the horses jumped about and reared. And if you remember from last time, when a horse rears, it is going up on its back legs like this, rearing horse, like so. So the horses are very scared. They're rearing on their hind legs and looked helplessly around. So they're looking around, but there is nothing that they can do. They can't get away. It says the living ring of terror encompassed them on every side, and they had perforce to remain within it. Okay, so a living ring of terror. We have to know what that means. Excuse me, my drawing skills, not so good. All right, so a ring, as we know, is just a circle shape. And terror is fear. Terror is being very, very scared. So a ring of terror is a circle of very scary things. And in this case, we know that this ring of terror means the wolves. The screaming wolves are all around the carriage, like this. And the horses... Can I draw horses? Not really. The horses are inside. So there is nothing the horses can do and no way for them to go away. It encompasses them on every side. To encompass is to go around, to circle. You might know the word compass. A compass is a circle that points in all directions. And so to encompass something is to make a circle around it in all directions. So the wolves encompass the horses on every side, and they had perforce to remain within it. Perforce, we can see, has the word force in it. So it means they must do it. They don't have any choice. So the horses have to stay where they are, or the wolves will eat them. So Jonathan yells to the driver, right? He says, I called to the coachman to come. And to aid his approach, of course, to aid is to help something, and to approach is to come close. So Jonathan is trying to help the coachman, to help the driver to come and escape. So he's yelling, he's hitting the carriage. Remember that the caleche is the kind of carriage that they are driving in. It looks like this, probably like this. Maybe like this. I think there's a roof. So he's yelling, he's reaching out the window and hitting the carriage, but it doesn't seem to work. The wolves aren't going anywhere, but it's okay. The driver is fine because Jonathan hears the driver shouting. I heard his voice raised, so his voice becomes loud. in a tone of imperious command. So this word imperious, you might know the word imperial. You might know it from Star Wars or from some hotel. Imperial means like an emperor, so like a big king. So he is, I mean, that's one meaning of the word. So he's shouting at the horses as if he is their king. And when Jonathan looks toward the sound of the driver's voice, he sees him standing there. Okay, the driver sweeps his arms as though brushing aside some impalpable obstacle. You might know an obstacle course. An obstacle is something that you have to get across or get through. And something that is impalpable is just something that you can't really touch or get past. Impalpable. You can't feel it. So like a spider web, right? And so the wolves go away. So whoever this driver is, the driver is able to shout at wolves and make them do what he wants them to do. So he seems to have some kind of special power. When I could see again, the driver was climbing into the caleche, and the wolves disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed interminable as we swept on our way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. So the driver gets back into the carriage, and I could see again. So he couldn't see again at first because the clouds were covering the moon. But when the moonlight comes again, the driver gets into the carriage. The wolves are gone. And Jonathan says that this is all very strange and uncanny. You might know the phrase uncanny valley, which is when something is just a little bit weird. Something, it's just strange enough to be disturbing. It seems almost normal, but not quite. So everything around Jonathan feels kind of unreal. It doesn't feel like normal life. This is also strange and uncanny. So Jonathan's very scared. And he says that the time seems interminable. So what does that mean? So this word term usually has something to do with time, and to terminate is to finish. So you might know the word terminus or the word terminal. Both of these are used to talk about the place where a bus or a metro will stop and turn around. So to terminate or a terminal, it's a place where we finish. So if something is interminable, it means not. So it means not finishing, never ending. So the time seemed interminable. That means that this ride feels like he is riding forever. Now in almost complete darkness, for the clouds obscured the moon, and to obscure is to hide. So there are clouds in front of the moon, and it's very dark. Moving on. We kept on ascending, with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main always ascending. Suddenly, I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast, ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the sky. Okay, so we talk about the ride. At first, what happens is that we kept on ascending. To ascend is to go up, right? Occasional periods of quick descent. So sometimes they go down. To descend is to go down. But in the main, which means mostly or almost always ascending. So they're going up and up and up and up and up. And suddenly, they're not driving anymore. The driver was in the act of pulling up the horses. Of course, he's not picking them up with his hands. To pull up the horses is to pull back and stop them. So the horses stop, and they're in the courtyard of a castle. The courtyard is the open space in the middle of something. Here we go. So we can see the walls of the castle around here, and the courtyard is this green place in the middle. Probably this one is not green. So they pull up the carriage in the courtyard, and it is a vast, ruined castle. Vast means very, very big, and ruined means it is old and it is broken. So very much like these castles, right? This is not a castle where people live anymore. This is a ruined castle. It's old and broken, and it looks like an empty place. From whose tall black windows came no ray of light. So this whose is a little tricky because it's referring back to the word castle. So the castle from whose tall black windows came no ray of light. That means that from the castle's windows there is no light. And again, this whose, that means again the castle, and that means from the castle's broken battlements are a jagged line. The battlements of the castle are the top here. This is the place where you can walk when you are a guard or something like that. So the battlements are broken, and they look kind of like this. They look jagged. Jagged means they're not straight or smooth. They're broken and ugly. So this is not a place where anyone would probably want to live, but this is where the driver has come with Jonathan. And we have finally finished chapter 1 on week 6. It took us a while to get here, so congratulations to all of us. And let's move on to chapter 2. Oh my God. All right, chapter 2, Jonathan Harker's journal continued. Remember that we are reading Jonathan Harker's journal. This is a book he's writing about his adventures so that he can tell his girlfriend Mina about everything that happened to him. All right, so 5th of May. I must have been asleep, for certainly if I had been fully awake, I must have noticed the approach of such a remarkable place. In the gloom, the courtyard looked of considerable size, and as several dark ways led from it under great round arches, it perhaps seemed bigger than it really is. I have not yet been able to see it by daylight. Okay, so Jonathan, he says, well, we couldn't have just come here by magic. The last thing I remember, we were driving in the mountains, so I must have been asleep, or I would have noticed. Remember this word approach, right? To approach is come closer. So he would have seen the castle coming closer if he was awake. He says that the castle is remarkable. If something is remarkable, it means it's interesting or unusual. Wait, rectangle. Let's use my high-tech whiteboard technology. Here we go. Remarkable. This is a really good word to know. It comes up a lot in books. Remarkable means interesting or unusual. So the castle is remarkable, and Jonathan thinks the only reason he didn't see it is because he was asleep, but probably there was another reason. So the courtyard looked of considerable size. So we never see these two words together, looked of, and so we can guess some words are missing here, which writers do a lot. Looked of is a short way of saying looked to be of. The courtyard looked to be of considerable size. So it means it looked like it was of considerable size. And considerable, another very good professional word that you'll see a lot. Considerable means pretty big or pretty important. Let's just say pretty big. easiest way to say it. All right. So the courtyard looks pretty big in the gloom. Remember that gloom means darkness. It says that several dark ways led from it. A way in modern English is just a method, or in contemporary English is just a method. But in this case, ways mean like hallways or corridors or paths or something like that. So there are several different sort of doors that lead out of the courtyard into the castle. And the doors are under great round arches like this. You can see in this castle right here. Maybe I can't. You can see the arches in this courtyard right here. You can go here, you can go here, you can go here, and maybe they'll all take you to a different place. So, but of course you can't see where any of them go because it's very dark. I have not yet been able to see it by daylight, so he has not been back to this place yet, even though he's probably been here for at least a few hours. Okay. When the caleche stopped, the driver jumped down and held out his hand to assist me to alight. Again, I could not but notice his prodigious strength. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. Then he took my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to a great door, old and studded with large iron nails, and set in a projecting doorway of massive stone. I could see even in the dim light that the stone was massively carved, but that the carving had been much worn by time and weather. As I stood, the driver jumped again into his seat and shook the reins. The horses started forward, and trap and all disappeared down one of the dark openings. All right, so the caleche stops. This little carriage stops in the courtyard. The driver jumps down. He holds out his hand to Jonathan. It says to assist him to alight. And the word assist, you probably know from assistance or assistant, means to help. So the driver is helping Jonathan to get down. To alight is to come down from the carriage. So the driver helps Jonathan to get out of the carriage. And again, Jonathan notices the driver's prodigious strength. So if you are a prodigy, you are an amazing person, right? You've probably seen the word prodigy before if you've learned about maybe Mozart, who is supposed to be a piano prodigy, a music prodigy. So something that is prodigious is something that is amazing. It's very surprising. So the driver is very, very strong. There's something unusual about him. His hand actually seemed like a steel vice. And vice in contemporary English is usually spelled with an S, at least in the USA. And a vice is a tool that is used to hold wood in place. I'm trying to find a picture. A steel vice. Wait, do they spell it this way too? Maybe in the UK they spell it this way. Interesting. Okay. Oh, okay. So maybe that's a variant spelling. In the US, we spell it V-I-S-E. But you can see this is something that will hold very, very tightly. It's a machine for gripping, a steel vise. So his hand seemed like a steel vise that could have crushed mine if he had chosen. So here we've got this unreal conditional, which you might know about if you've studied English grammar. If he had chosen, his hand could have crushed mine. Okay, so let's put it into a more understandable present tense conditional sentence. If he chooses, His hand can crush mine. This is kind of a real conditional. It's not quite the same thing. So let's make it just simple past tense. If he chose, his hand could crush mine. So this if in English always means we are imagining something that can happen, but it has not happened yet. So in some languages, if and when, those two words are kind of interchangeable. In English, they're very different. So if only means this thing maybe will happen, but we don't know yet. So if he chose is the past tense word of choose, right? If he chose, his hand could crush mine. So if it could, this is past tense of, it's from can. It's the past tense form of can. So this means that if this man wants to, he can break Jonathan's hand with his own hand. But of course, he didn't want to do that. So Jonathan only imagines what it would be like if this man wanted to hurt him. Then he took my traps. This word usually means like a bear trap, for example. Let's say a steel trap. I don't want to see any hurt animal. I saw a wolf in a trap. I didn't want to see that. So this is a trap. That's not what we mean. This is more like the word trappings, which just means stuff. So Jonathan says he took my traps. That means the man took his stuff. He took Jonathan's bags and his, hat box or whatever he has. Would he have a hat box? Whatever John has with him. He takes all of Jonathan's stuff. He puts it on the ground. And while the driver is putting Jonathan's things down, Jonathan is standing beside a door. He took my traps and placed them on the ground beside me as I stood close to a great door. And the great door is old. The great door is great, which does not mean it was very good. It means it was very big. So there's a big door here. It's an old door that is studded with nails. Studded means it's kind of like poked. So a door studded with iron nails will look like this. This is both a decoration and I think it's supposed to make the door stronger. So whoever had this castle maybe was afraid someone would try to break in and hurt them. This was like a castle in a dangerous place. And the door was set in a projecting doorway of massive stone. Projecting means that it's sticking out like this. And projecting. So you can see, I think that this doorway here, it kind of comes out from the wall. So this is a projecting doorway of massive stone. And we see this word massive 2 times in the paragraph. Massive means very, very big. Big and heavy, usually. It's massive stone, and the stone is massively carved, right? So it has lots of carvings in it. Carved stone. Like so. So there are pictures in the stone, but Jonathan cannot see what the pictures are because the carving had been much worn by time and weather. This word worn is the 3rd form of wear. We don't mean wear like clothes. To wear away is to break something down or take away. So Jonathan can't see what the pictures on the stone are because the stone has been worn away by time and weather. So let's look down here. I think that I have seen some stone carvings like this. If you look at very old stone carvings, little pieces of them will start to break off, right? So you can't see what was there originally. Ancient stone carving. I'm trying to remember, there was a place I went to where you couldn't even see, yeah, here, it's becoming difficult to see the faces of these people because the stone has been worn away by time. Right, so the horses are driven away, right? The driver takes the horses away, and now Jonathan is all by himself in the courtyard. All right. I stood in silence where I was, for I did not know what to do. Of bell or knocker there was no sign. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings, it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. The time I waited seemed endless, and I felt doubts and fears crowding upon me. What sort of place had I come to, and among what kind of people? What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? Was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? Solicitor's clerk. Mina would not like that. Solicitor. For just before leaving London, I got word that my examination was successful, and I am now a full-blown solicitor. I began to rub my eyes and pinch myself to see if I were awake. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare to me, and I expected that I should suddenly awake and find myself at home, with the dawn struggling in through the windows, as I had now and again felt in the morning after a day of overwork. But my flesh answered the pinching test, and my eyes were not to be deceived. I was indeed awake and among the Carpathians. All I could do now was to be patient and to wait the coming of morning. So Jonathan is standing outside a door in an ancient castle courtyard. Let's look for a medieval castle courtyard. And it is very dark. There is no one here with him. He is all alone. And he has no idea what he should do. I thought we had a better picture before. Anyway. So Jonathan is standing by a door. There is no way into the castle. He says, I stood in silence, for I did not know what to do. Of bell and knocker there was no sign. We can reverse the sentence and make it more contemporary. We can say, there was no sign of a bell or a knocker. So if there is no sign of something, you cannot see it at all. You cannot see even a clue that it is there. So there is no doorbell, and there is no door knocker. And this door that Jonathan sees is so big that if he knocks, it probably won't make any noise anyway. So through these frowning walls and dark window openings, it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. So we have again, he has reversed the order of the sentence from what is usual. So let's rewrite it. We're rewriting this, excuse me. Oh, let's just use these. Goodbye to you. We're rewriting this sentence here. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings, it was not likely that my voice could penetrate. So we can break this into the prepositional phrase. Through these frowning walls and dark window openings. So this is the place or the direction we're talking about. And here is the main sense of the sentence. It was not likely that my voice could penetrate. It was not likely that my voice could penetrate through these frowning walls and dark window openings. And to penetrate is to go through something. But it was not likely that Jonathan's voice could go through the walls. The walls are very thick. Not likely means it probably will not happen. The walls are very thick. They are frowning walls. So if I frown, my face kind of sticks out like this. So the walls, they're very heavy. They're very dark. And the windows are very dark too. And Jonathan thinks his voice cannot go into the castle, which means if he starts to yell, nobody will hear him. He's all by himself, all alone, and he can't call for help because nobody will hear what he says. So he's stuck just waiting outside of the castle. And he says, the time I waited seemed endless. You remember that word interminable? Interminable and endless mean exactly the same thing. Interminable is from the French or from the Latin. Endless is from the old Germanic root words. It means the same thing. Okay. The time I waited seemed endless. He's feeling very scared. He's starting to doubt himself. If you don't know doubt, this is very good. It means you think that you will not succeed or you think something bad will happen. And Jonathan is wondering what the hell is going on with my life. What sort of grim adventure was it on which I had embarked? So this word embark is quite interesting because the word bark in contemporary English means the covering of a tree. But we don't mean that here. We mean a ship. In older English dialects, a bark was another way to say a ship. So if you embark, you get onto a ship and you go out on your journey. So Jonathan has embarked on a grim adventure. Grim means it's very dark and serious and scary. And he's like, what am I doing here? What is happening in my life? And there we get a little bit funny. Jonathan, he kind of lightens up a little bit, right? He says, was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner? Now, this actually is really important because number one, we learn why Jonathan is here. And number two, we learn an important development in Jonathan's life. So first question, was this a customary incident in the life of a solicitor's clerk? Customary, your custom is what usually happens to you, right? Custom is what is usual. So Jonathan is saying, is this a normal thing? Is this something that happens to anybody in the life of a solicitor's clerk, which is like a lawyer's assistant? Do we have a picture? Solicitor's clerk. Jonathan, of course, would say clerk because he's from England, but I'm American, I say clerk. A clerk or a clerk is someone whose job is to write things down, to send messages, to keep records, and generally help out the important people who do the real job. And so Jonathan specifically is a solicitor's clerk, which means he works for a solicitor or a lawyer. A solicitor's clerk is a law clerk. And Jonathan says, a solicitor's clerk sent out. Send, we have the past participle. Sent is the third form of send. So Jonathan has been sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner. So this is why Jonathan is here. Jonathan is a solicitor's clerk. He was sent out to explain the purchase of a London estate to a foreigner. So Jonathan is here to explain something as I am explaining things to you now. What he is explaining is a purchase. When you purchase something, you buy it. So he's telling someone how to buy something. And specifically, he is telling a foreigner or a person from another country, by which we mean Count Dracula. That's the person he's coming to see, right? So Jonathan has come to see Count Dracula to explain how to buy a London estate. And your estate is the big, beautiful, important house where you live. So Count Dracula is trying to buy a big, beautiful, important house in London. And London is the city that Jonathan came from. London is a very modern city and many, many, many people live there. And this person, Count Dracula, is trying to move to London right now. And then we have a cute little note. Jonathan says, solicitor's clerk. That's what he said he was. He said, I'm a solicitor's clerk. And then he remembers, Mina would not like that. Mina is Jonathan's girlfriend or his fiance. They're probably going to be married soon. Jonathan mentions her a lot in this story. He talks a lot about her. We can guess he probably loves her. Mina would not like that. Solicitor. Jonathan says, I am not a solicitor's clerk. I am a solicitor. I am a lawyer. Because, just before leaving London, I got word, he got the news that his examination was successful. So Jonathan, before this story, was working as an assistant lawyer. He was working as a lawyer's clerk, but Jonathan was also studying because he wanted to be a lawyer or a solicitor himself. And now Jonathan has passed the test, and he says, I am now a full-blown solicitor. If you're a full-blown something, that means you are a real one. You're an official one. He's not just a junior assistant anymore. He's a real lawyer, a real solicitor. This is important because Jonathan is a single man. He's been writing this diary to Mina Murray, right? Jonathan Harker is his name. The woman named Mina, her name is Mina Murray. So Jonathan loves Mina, but they're not married yet. Probably the reason why they're not married yet is because it is currently in this story in the 1800s, maybe 1897, let's say 1897, because that's when this book was written. And so the job of the man is to make the money. The job of the woman is to stay at home and clean the house and make it nice, at least for richer people, right? Jonathan is middle class. And so when he was a solicitor's clerk, he had not enough money to take care of Mina, and so they could not get married. But now Jonathan has passed his solicitor test. He's passed his lawyer test, which means that when he comes back from the Carpathians, he and Mina can get married. So this is very exciting for him, and that's why he's so excited when he says, oh yeah, that's right. I'm not a solicitor's clerk at all. I am a full-blown solicitor. And when he thinks of that, he starts to cheer up, right? He starts to say, wait, I'm worrying about nothing. This clearly isn't real. So he begins to rub his eyes. He starts to pinch himself to see if he's dreaming, like we do. If we think maybe we're dreaming, we pinch ourselves so we wake up. It all seemed like a horrible nightmare. He thinks it's a bad dream. And he expects to wake up. I expected that I should suddenly awake. Awake in contemporary English is always an adjective, like I am awake now. And for the verb form, we usually use wake, like I will wake up soon, or probably he will wake up soon. But in older forms, we could say he will awake soon. So Jonathan thinks that he's dreaming. He pinches himself, but he says he'll awake and find himself at home. At home, he means in London, with dawn struggling into the window. So Jonathan thinks he has been up all night working, right? A day of overwork. He thinks he's been up all night and he's having a nightmare and he'll wake up soon. But he says, my flesh, his skin and muscle, right? His flesh answered the pinching test. So when he pinches himself, his arm says, ow, right? His eyes are not to be deceived. To deceive is to trick. His eyes are not being tricked. He looks around and he sees what is really there. What is really there is that Jonathan is awake. Jonathan is in the mountains among the Carpathians, and there is nothing for him to do but wait and hope that he's okay. All right, my voice is starting to go, so I think I'll do just a couple more paragraphs here, because we are just about to meet Count Dracula. All right. Just as I had come to this conclusion, I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door, and saw through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned with the loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. So Jonathan has just come to that conclusion. He has just realized or decided that he is going to have to be patient and wait for morning. He's just decided, look, there's nothing I can do. I'll just stand here patiently. Very English. But just as he thinks this, he hears a heavy step approaching. We mean more than one step. We mean footsteps. So he hears boom, 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 boom. He hears someone walking heavily to the great door, which again means the big door. And so he looks through the chinks of the door. A chink in this case is a small crack like this, right? So maybe here's the door. Oh, excuse me. So let's say here is the door and here's the wall. And so you can look, there's my door. You can look through here, right? You can look into these little spaces and see something behind the door. So he sees through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. So he hears footsteps and he sees light behind the door. There's the sound of rattling chains. A chain is something like this. And the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. So we're talking about a door bolt, which is a lock. So they're ancient bolts. They're massive bolts. We remember massive means very, very big and very, very strong and heavy. So the door is unlocked very slowly. It has been locked very carefully. And then this is an interesting detail about the key. The key is turned with the loud grating noise of long disuse. Grating is like a scraping sound, like shh. So the key has been in the door for a long time, and the key has been disused. Dis is one of those negative word prefixes. To use, you know what it means to use something. So if something has been in long disuse, that means that no one has used that thing for a really long time. So let's look for a good image. A castle door key. So this key has been in the lock for a long time, but no one has turned this key. And if no one has turned the key, that means that no one has opened this door in a long time, which is very strange for a castle where you think people will come in and out very often, right? And so here we see the man that Jonathan has come to visit. Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp, in which the flame burned without a chimney or globe of any kind, throwing long quivering shadows as it flickered in the draught of the open door. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own free will." So I think this is going to be our last paragraph for today. My voice is getting quite rough right now. So within, which means inside, we see a tall man. That will be an important detail later. The man is clean shaven, which means that he does not have a beard. He's clean shaven, right? He's not bearded. Clean shaven, save for, that means except for a long white mustache, which is kind of funny. So let's look for a clean shaven old man. Here we go. We'll use George Clooney here. No, let's use this fellow here. Who's that? Keith Mayhew. Okay. I don't know my celebrities. Let's give him a long white mustache. There we go. Very handsome. So here is our gentleman, right? He's an old man. Sorry, Keith. Clean shaven. Wait, who is that? Keith Mayhew would be the photographer, right? I don't know the celebrity guys. I'm sorry. You can tell me if you know. All right. Save for a long white mustache and clad in black from head to foot. Clad means dressed or wearing. So he's wearing black clothing from his head to his foot. There is no red, there's no white, not a single speck of color about him anywhere. So there's an old man dressed all in black, holding in his hand an antique silver lamp. Antique means a very old silver lamp. Antique silver lamp. A light that we can probably hold in our hand. Let's say an antique silver lantern. Maybe something like this. Yeah, he's holding a lamp or a lantern. And the flame in the lantern is burning by itself without a chimney or a globe of any kind. So this here is the lantern's chimney, but we are saying here that it's just an empty space and there's just a fire inside. So maybe an antique oil lamp like this. Ancient oil lamp. Maybe something like this, but silver. That's good. All right, so he's holding a silver lamp and the fire is burning. There is no glass to protect it. And the fire throws long quivering shadows. Quivering is shaking, so the fire is kind of going as it flickers in the draft of the open door. So the wind is blowing through the door onto the fire, and the fire is going and making black shadows all over the hallway. But the old man seems very nice. He motions Jonathan in with a courtly gesture. Courtly means very polite, very nice and elegant. And he says to Jonathan, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely. Come in freely and of your own free will." That means I will not make you come in. I want you to come in because you want to come in. This is kind of a strange greeting, but that is how Count Dracula greets Jonathan Harker. And we will see next time what happens to Jonathan Harker after that. So we're going to cut off there for today. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you again soon. Okay, goodbye.